An unexpected beginning. The military journey of Sergeant Karl L. Keath. Sergeant Karl L. Keath was born in Lebanon, PA on July 26, 1966. He attended Lebanon School District through middle school and then transferred to Eastern Lebanon County High School in his ninth grade year. Keath is the youngest child of Edward and Marilyn Keath. He has two older sisters named Pam and Zena. He graduated from Elko and immediately started working. He was unsure of his future or occupation. He worked as a playground director for the summer and then worked in a knitting factory in Robizonia. In high school, Karl Keath contemplated joining the Army during his junior and senior year, and then he would go through basic training. Eventually, he thought he would join the Army full-time after graduation. Keath said that he had an episode of cold feet and did not join at that time. He, however, enlisted in the military in the 80s after not being able to secure a job in the HVAC field. He had taken courses in this field at CTC in high school to help narrow down his career. He became increasingly frustrated in the poor economy and lack of jobs in his field of expertise. Keath decided to join the military to pave a better pathway for his future. He knew he could study HVAC if he chose a branch in the military. Keath chose to join the Air Force at this time. He chose the Air Force because they were known for having the best technical school training. Keath knew that he had to make sacrifices if he joined the Air Force. One of the major sacrifices was leaving his family and girlfriend behind. Family was very important to him. He said, geez, I left my entire family, my mother and my father and my sisters. I did not have a pet at that time in my life. I did have a girlfriend at that time. And then I, of course, had my high school friends that I had grown up with. I had left them behind. Keith's first point of entry into the military was actually in Myerstown, Pennsylvania on Main Street. He was picked up by the Air Force in a tailways bus, which drove him to the Harrisburg Air Force Depot. It was there where he was sworn in, and then boarded a plane for Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. Keath participated in several trainings in the military. He went through basic training, which was all types of military life. Then he had survival training for the job in the military. Then he was a part of upgrading the HVAC field, and lastly, small and large arms training. He explained that my specialized training was with handguns and with basically what you would call small arms. I also had specialized training in my career field. Well, now technology is a lot better since then, but in a wartime situation, you would put a communication pod in a strategic area, and it has to be cooled. And that was one of my wartime jobs, which was to work on the AC of a communication pod, which could be out of a jungle, on top of a mountain, so the risk of being captured in a wartime situation was a possibility. So I did have to go through survival training in case that would happen. Keith started his training at the Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and then went to Wichita Falls, Texas for schooling. This was his first actual assignment after basic training. He visited multiple bases for training, but ended up at Kessler Air Force Base in Mississippi. While serving at the Kessler Air Force Base, he trained and worked hard in HVAC. He said, Keith's military instructors were actually from his home state of Pennsylvania. One of his instructors resided in Altoona and the other one from Harrisburg. Keith said,
They were both very fit. They were both actually masters in the arts of karate, which was very interesting to me.
He remembers being taken aside by his instructor and talking about Lebanon and Harrisburg. Keith recalls a personal connection with his drill instructor and about their common upbringing.
The drill instructor had, at one point in time, had taken me aside because everybody in your squadron is from all over the country, actually, and other countries at that. And he took me to the side and he said, I saw that you're from Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And he said, I am from Harrisburg. So I laughed, and then he asked me, because back in the 70s, 60s and 70s actually, and maybe the beginning of the 80s, in Lebanon, they had a area which they called the cruising loop. And that was where you drove a car through the loop of Lebanon, which was Cumberland Street, Walnut Street, and then they would go through McDonald's, and at that time it was the Dixie. and he told me that he cruised the loop a couple times, so I had a little bit of a connection to my drill.
Keith also mentions that although they were reasonable most of the time, they did become stricter and louder during survival training. Keith had to train with special heavy equipment for his job. He remembers driving an 18-wheel truck, a dump truck, and a backhoe. He also needed to know how to fit these vehicles in tight spots in under pressure situations. On occasion, he would have to know how to fix the vehicle if that were to break down during an operation. He also had to drive these vehicles to work sites for HVAC duties. The buildings he worked on were dormitories, cafeterias, and commanding facilities that needed heating and air conditioning units serviced. Keith also reflects on how important his job was during wartime experiences. Since he was involved in HVAC, he needed to keep buildings and vehicles cool in a hot climate of Texas and Mississippi. Keith was able to attain the senior airman below the zone status in his time in the military. He was promoted to this status by his leaders. Keith commented on how that
I
transpired.
actually received that senior airman below the zone, which gave me a promotional stripe, which allowed me to get to sergeant early. And I would have, if I would have re-enlisted, I would have put on my staff sergeant stripes.
Keith had many stories and memories throughout his tenure in the military. These memories are truly what helped shape his life. He experienced both good and bad situations. His fondest memory was actually from his recruiter before he left for basic training. He recalls giving him words of wisdom in dealing with instructors. His recruiter told him to never volunteer for anything. Keith said that advice was very useful in his first encounter in basic training. He tells the story.
I need 6 volunteers. We'll have to take the highest averages of the 6 or of the 10 to get 6 players for our squadron bowling team. So after that happened, he got the 6 people with the 6 highest averages, and he asked them to get up, and they went into the bathroom, and he kicked the doors open to the bathroom, and it said, for the whole basic training, this is your bowl, this is your bowl, to 6 different guys. There were 6 toilets, so that was for them to take care of the whole time during basic training. So at that point in time, I knew my recruiter told me the right thing: don't volunteer. So.
One of Keith's vivid memories in survival training happened when they were dropped off with a group of people in the middle of Washington and had to try not to get captured. The space was 100 acres long and they had to learn to survive. The group had to make decisions of where to go. Keith explains the narrative in this way.
The vivid part of that was and you join people that you have never met before. The biggest thing for me is that you have some strong-willed people when you get together, and one group wanted to do something a certain way and another group wanted to do it a certain way. So we ended up splitting, which is not probably the most logical thing to do in that type of situation. But I agreed with a smaller group, and we basically formed a little group together, and we went through survival training and never got captured. Actually, the other group, with what they thought was the right thing to do, ended up getting captured. So that was probably my most vivid part of survival training.
Keith reflects on what the hardest and easiest military lifestyle to adapt to during his time there. He agreed that the hardest part of it all was the fear of the unknown and what to expect. For example, he was told to drive an 18-wheel vehicle, which was the heaviest he had ever drove. The easiest adaptation to military life for him was making friends, as he encountered many opportunities for friendship. He also reflected on the friendship he made and vowed to try and stay in touch, as most of them were scattered to different bases and locations over the United States. Keith's personal experiences with the military were not always filled with work, stress, and routine exercises. He also recalls time for fun and recreation. He was on the basketball and softball team during his service. He also said that his team played Division II and III schools and occasionally would play Division I JV teams. He recalled that these were very fond and active memories. Along with these fun activities, Keith talked about what the best part of his service was. He really enjoyed the various types of food in the South that were new to him. He only really experienced Dutch-style cooking before entering the military. He also really enjoyed the traveling. As Keith's time came closer to end in the Air Force, he began thinking of his future and whether he could continue his military service or go into the working world. This proved to be a tough decision for him. He remembers going home on leave for a weekend and discussing it with his parents and looking into the occupational choices. It was then that he received some interviews with HVAC companies and decided that the job market was much better than 4 years earlier. Ultimately, he decided to end his military career and enter the profession of an HVAC professional in his hometown. Keith reflects on his experiences in the military as being both positive and challenging. He would promote the military as an option to any young person if they are unsure of their future. The military provides structure and a stepping stone for a person who needs to get a fresh start. For Keith, the military provided stability as he reflected on having to go through his parents' divorce as a child. The military allowed him the ability to mature as a man. He also had learned many life lessons while serving. He sums up his lessons by
You have
saying,
control of your destiny. You have control of your life. So you basically, what you put into it is what you will get out of it. So you can go through your time in the military and just, be a soldier and, be very good at it, or you can try to exceed and become, grab more rank and try to be more of a leader. And that was sort of what led me towards, I think, having leadership qualities through the military is what made me who I am today.